Last week, protests erupted across Australian cities, drawing hundreds into the streets. The organisers branded it the March for Australia, a rally they claimed for patriotism, culture and national values. But on the ground, the picture was different. Fights erupted, scuffles with police broke out. And Palestinian flags were torn down and even attempted to be set alight. Yet behind the slogans and the scuffles lies a deeper story, one tied to extremist networks, hidden agendas, and a movement far more dangerous than its branding suggests. Its roots stretch into some of the most extreme fringes of Australia's far-right movement, from deleted slogans to the shadow of neo-Nazi networks. So who was really behind this rally, and what does the March for Australia reveal about the forces trying to shape this country's future? Well, let's find out. It began quietly on August 8th. A website appeared for the March for Australia. On its front page, a link titled "Why We're Marching." Now the bullet points seemed simple enough at first glance: no foreign flags, end mass immigration, remigration now. But by August 11th, something on the website quietly disappeared. A single word: remigration. It might sound like just another way of saying less immigration, but in far-right circles, it carries a very different meaning. Remigration refers to pressuring or outright forcing migrants, even citizens whose families have lived in the country for generations, to return to their so-called homelands. Some describe it more politely as reverse migration, whereas scholars and watchdog groups describe it as a proposal for creating white-only states. In Europe, far-right parties have made it central to their platforms. In the United States, the idea even surfaced inside the Trump administration as a proposed office of remigration before being condemned as extremist. And here, in Australia, the word appeared briefly as a reason to march. And then, without explanation, it vanished. So, who is really behind this? Now, unlike traditional protest movements, March for Australia has no clear leader. Instead, a shifting cast of voices takes turns to front it. But one name has become familiar: Beck Freedom. A self-described digital creator, she has also taken ownership of the Sydney March. In interviews, she calls herself a freedom fighter, a nationalist, and a patriot. She told radio station 2GB she avoids using her real name for protection, but her record online raises some serious questions. She has proudly supported the National Workers Alliance, a group dedicated to the preservation of European culture. She has also shared posts from Sherman Burgess, once one of Australia's most notorious anti-Islam activists. Known as the Great Aussie Patriot, Burgess led movements like Reclaim Australia and the United Patriots Front, before later, in a surprising turn, actually converting to Islam. But Beck insists she does not share all of his beliefs. Instead, she frames herself as someone protecting Australia and Australian values. But recordings of her speaking at length tell another story. What begins with talk of Australian culture gradually narrows into something more exclusive: talk of protecting white values, not national ones. Have a listen.
I think, look, the messaging, we just need to, and look, I understand why some people are saying, oh, it's not about race. Though people like that, they're scared.
Yeah.
But if we break it down, this is how I tried to explain it to somebody. I said, okay, so protect Australian heritage, culture, way of life. The next step, protect European culture, heritage, way of life. The next step is protect white heritage. So it all means the same thing. It's just different ways to put it. Australian heritage, by saying it that way, it is more appealing to the public. It's going to deter them from saying, oh, it's a Nazi rally, blah, blah, blah. That's all it means. Australian is white, is European white.
Now, these aren't slip-ups or out-of-context comments. They reflect a worldview that goes far beyond patriotism. And they reveal why so many are increasingly concerned about who is shaping this movement. Now, many of those drawn to March for Australia aren't strangers to protest. They first rallied against lockdowns, against vaccines, against restrictions during the pandemic. Now, those same networks have reassembled under a new cause: immigration. The March promos have equally been strange. One AI clip even showed a hijabi woman proudly fronting the cause. It's almost as if AI didn't get the brief. And politicians too have been quick to weigh in, including Australia's very own Bob Katter, who made headlines with his fiery comments.
If there is a member of the mainstream parties there, throw eggs at them, please. Throw something at them.
Just don't go asking him about his heritage.
You've got Lebanese heritage yourself. What would you
Oh, mate, don't say that, because that irritates me, and I punch blokes in the mouth for saying that. Don't you dare say that.
And, as expected, Pauline Hanson made her appearance in the debate, using her moment to criticise Palestinian flags at rallies.
It's all right to see the Palestinian flag out in these protest rallies and all these other, even Hamas flags, terrorist flags.
And among the political responses was Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke, who characterised the march as couldn't be less Australian. Now, some organisers pointed to Gaza, presenting their march as the defence of Australian values over Palestinian solidarity. But in reality, Australia has already seen what those values look like. 300,000 Australians side by side crossing the harbour bridge in peace, opposing the genocide in Gaza. The contrast couldn't be sharper. One side narrows Australia down to race, the other shows that looking out for humanity is what Australians actually stand for. The protesters' messaging is confusing and quite clearly contradictory. But within that confusion, something far darker emerges. March for Australia insists that they're not far right, that they're not associated with neo-Nazis or white supremacist groups. They argue such groups are fringe, trying to exploit their event. But actions tell another story. They've allowed them to advertise the march and promote it within their own channels. Some march-linked speeches have gone even further, calling openly for violence and declaring that Adolf Hitler needs to be accepted among Australians.
The Australian public are going to have to accept Hitler in their hearts, in their schools. They're going to have to accept Hitler. We're not going to disown Hitler.
These aren't random trolls. These are voices from within the movement's own organisers and supporters. And no figure made that more clearer than Tom Sewell. Sewell isn't just another protester. He's the leader of the National Socialist Network, a group that openly identifies with neo-Nazi ideology. And at the March for Australia rally in Melbourne, he wasn't on the sidelines. He was organising centre stage. Sewell was handed the microphone and gave what was, effectively, the rally's keynote address. In other words, any claim that this movement had nothing to do with the far right was now difficult to take seriously. Because when one of Australia's most notorious neo-Nazi figures is elevated to the role of headline speaker, the picture becomes clear. This wasn't just about patriotism or culture, or even values. It had become a platform for the far right. And just listen to some of the things said by these guys. One guy went so far as to claim that being Australian is something only white people can be.
What about all the other Australians that are not white?
There are plenty of other people representing them.
There is no Australians that aren't white.
So anyone who's not white is not Australian?
Correct.
Now, I hate to break it to you, but this is what an Australian looks like too. And I'm not the only one. But here lies the contradiction. The march claims to be about ordinary Australians, everyday mums and dads, workers and families, worried about immigration. But the fingerprints of extremism are everywhere. A website that listed remigration as a goal, organisers tied to the National Socialist Network. At best, it has passively invited extremists to walk alongside them. At worst, it has knowingly built on their support. And it isn't just the march that raises some serious questions. The media's coverage does too. For years, Sky News has tried to paint pro-Palestine rallies as anti-Semitic, often simply for opposing what the United Nations and major human rights groups have recognised as a genocide. But when Tom Sewell, the leader of Australia's most notorious neo-Nazi network, was given the stage, Sky News described him as just a right-wing activist. No mention of his neo-Nazi ties, no mention of his violent record. Palestinian rallies are relentlessly defamed, while an actual neo-Nazi is handed a softer label on national television. And it's not like his record is hard to find. I mean, you can literally Google the guy and find it out for yourself. Because if I can Google the guy in like 5 seconds, you think Sky News could too. Unless, of course, they didn't want to. And that's the real story here. Not just the march in the streets, but the story being rewritten on television screens. And at that point, it's not a mistake. It's a pattern, one where Palestinian voices are vilified, while extremists are given cover. On the surface, the March for Australia presents itself as a rally for pride and culture. But beneath the banners, contradictions emerge. Language that disappears from official pages, organisers with ties to extremist groups, and rhetoric that reshapes the idea of values into something far more narrow. Now that leaves us a choice. Do we build walls out of fear, or build bridges out of compassion? Because in the end, this is not just about a single march. It is about how societies choose to define themselves, and whether national pride is built on exclusion or on the shared humanity that connects us all.